Hi, I'm Reese. I came home from a double shift at the hospital one Tuesday night to find my daughter locked out on the back deck in the middle of a January ice storm, her little fingers blue, her diaper soaked through, her cry already gone hoarse. My own mother stood inside the warm kitchen with a glass of Chardonnay in her hand and said, "I told you, I don't babysit accidents." My older sister was right behind her, phone up, filming, laughing like it was the funniest thing she'd seen all week. What happened in the next 40 minutes turned my whole life inside out, and I still can't tell this story without my hands shaking. Before I get into it, drop a comment and tell me what time it is where you are and what state you're listening from. I want to know who's with me tonight. And honestly, tell me what you would have done if you walked up that driveway and saw what I saw. It was January 8th, somewhere around 9:40 at night, in a little suburb outside Greensboro, North Carolina. I'd just come off back-to-back 12s on the cardiac step-down floor, and I remember sitting on the bus thinking that all I wanted in this world was a hot shower and to bury my face in my daughter's hair. Her name is Emery. She was 14 months old. She had this little laugh that came out like a hiccup, and she'd just learned to say "Mama" 2 weeks before, and I swear to God I lived for that sound. I was renting the basement of my mother's split level for $400 a month, which was robbery in that neighborhood, but she'd made a whole performance out of taking me in after Emery's father walked out on the lease 6 months into the pregnancy. The deal was, I worked, I paid rent, I bought my own groceries, and on the 2 long shifts a week I had to pull, my mother would watch Emery for 2 hours between when daycare ended and when I got home. That was it. That was the whole arrangement. And every single time she did it, she made it sound like she was donating a kidney. The ice storm had started around 6. I'd been texting her since 7 asking how Emery was, and she'd given me a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. That should have been my first sign. My mother doesn't do emojis. My mother writes paragraphs. The bus dropped me at the corner of Brookhaven and Pine, and the sidewalk was already a sheet of glass. I remember sliding the last half block in my white nursing clogs, holding on to mailboxes and the wind cutting through my scrub jacket like I wasn't wearing anything at all. When I rounded the hedge in front of the house, the first thing I noticed was that every light in the front of the house was on. Warm yellow squares. My mother was in the kitchen. I could see her through the bay window, leaning on the island, laughing at something my sister Cara was saying. The second thing I noticed was the sound. A thin, broken little wail coming from somewhere I couldn't place. It didn't sound human at first. It sounded like a cat that had been crying for so long it had run out of cat in it. I followed the sound around the side of the house, past the trash cans, through the gate to the back deck, and there she was, my Emery, my baby, sitting on the planks of the back deck in nothing but a onesie and a diaper, the little pink one with the cherries on it that I put her in that morning at 6 a.m. No coat. No shoes. No blanket. The deck was glazed in ice. Her hair was stuck to her face in wet ropes. Her lips were the color of a bruise. I think I made a sound. I don't remember what it was. I dropped my bag and my coffee thermos right there on the ice, and I ran and I scooped her up, and she didn't even cry harder. She just kind of collapsed into me, and that was so much worse than crying. That meant she'd been out there long enough to give up. I tried the sliding glass door. It was locked. I could see them both, my mother and my sister, standing right there in the kitchen, 8 feet from me, looking at me through the glass like I was something on television. I banged on the door. "Mom, Mom, open the door right now." My mother walked over, took her sweet time, slid the door open about 6 inches. The warm air hit my face and I could smell garlic bread. "Reese," she said, like she was greeting a neighbor. "You're home. How long has she been out here?" She tilted her head. She was throwing a fit. I told her if she wanted to scream like an animal, she could do it outside. "Mom, it is 28 degrees. She doesn't have shoes on." My sister Cara appeared behind her, leaning on the doorframe. Kara's 2 years older than me, and she has always known exactly which knife to twist. She had her phone out. She was still filming. "Don't be dramatic," Cara said. "It's been like 10 minutes. 10 minutes? My voice cracked. Look at her lips. She's hypothermic, Kara. She's fine. You're a nurse, you'd know if she wasn't. I pushed past my mother into the kitchen, because I had to get Emery warm, and I started toward the stairs to the basement, and my mother stepped in front of me. You're not bringing her down there sopping wet on my carpet. I just looked at her. I looked at my own mother, and I said, move. She didn't move. She crossed her arms. I told you, Reese, I'm done. I am 61 years old. I raised my kids. I am not raising your mistake. You either find somebody else to watch her on your long days, or you find somewhere else to live. Kara laughed. Just this short, sharp bark of a laugh. Maybe try the dad? Oh, wait, and I want you to understand something. I have spent my entire life being the family disappointment. I got pregnant at 23. I didn't finish my 4-year degree. I went the ADN route at the community college because it was faster and I needed a paycheck. I have eaten every cruel thing these two women have ever said to me, and I have said thank you for the leftovers. But standing in that kitchen, holding my freezing baby against my chest, feeling her little ribs shaking against me, something in me went quiet in a way I had never felt before. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot. This was cold. This was the coldest I have ever been on the inside of my own body. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and walked back out the sliding glass door into the storm. I heard my mother yell after me, "Oh, that's mature, Reese, real mature," and I heard Kara laugh again, and then I heard the door slide shut and the lock click. I stood on that deck in the ice with my daughter for maybe 30 seconds, trying to think. My diaper bag was inside. My wallet was inside. My phone, thank God, was in my scrub pocket. Emery was shaking so hard I could feel her teeth knocking together against my collarbone. I unzipped my scrub jacket, pulled it open, and pressed her against my bare skin under my scrub top, then zipped the jacket back up around the both of us, skin to skin. It's the first thing they teach you in the NICU rotation. I started walking. I made it maybe 4 blocks before my feet stopped feeling like my feet. The sidewalks were impossible, so I was walking in the road, in the tire tracks where the ice was a little broken up. I was heading toward the 7-Eleven on Battleground because they had a payphone outside and they were open all night, and I knew the guy who worked the overnight. His name was Hassan, and he had a baby of his own at home. I never made it to the 7-Eleven. Somewhere on Hawthorne, I stepped off the curb to go around a downed branch, and my back foot just went out from under me. I went down hard on my hip and my elbow. I rolled at the last second so I wouldn't land on Emery. I heard her start to cry, full cry this time, and I've never been so relieved to hear a baby scream in my life. And then headlights. I remember the sound of brakes locking up on ice, that long, sliding, grinding sound. I remember curling around Emery and just thinking, please, not her, please, not her, please, not her. I remember thinking I hadn't told her yet that day that I loved her because I'd left for work before she was awake. The car stopped. I don't know how. Maybe 6 feet from us. Maybe less. The driver was out of the car before I could push myself up onto my good elbow. He was older, mid-50s maybe, tall, gray at the temples, wearing one of those big tan Carhartt jackets that contractors wear, and he had a flashlight on his phone, and he was crouched next to me before I could say a word. Ma'am, don't move. Is the baby hurt? Talk to me. What hurts? She's cold. I couldn't get my voice above a whisper. She's been outside. She's so cold. He didn't ask any more questions. He scooped his arm under my shoulders and helped me sit up, and then he half-carried me to his truck and got me into the passenger seat and turned the heat to the floor and the seat warmer on high. He took off his Carhartt and wrapped it around both of us. It smelled like sawdust and coffee. I'm taking you to Cone Health, he said. It's the closest. 10 minutes. I work there, I said. I started to cry. I hadn't cried yet. Not the whole night, and now I couldn't stop. I work there. I'm a nurse there. Step down. 4th floor. Okay, that's good. You'll know everybody. What's her name? Emery. Hi, Emery. He was already pulling onto the road, easy and slow on the ice. I'm Frank. You and your mama are gonna be okay. I remember at one point reaching for my phone to call somebody and realizing there was nobody to call. My best friend Talia was in Charlotte. My dad died when I was 19. My aunt on my dad's side was in Ohio and we hadn't talked in 2 years. There was nobody. There had been nobody for a long time and I just hadn't let myself know it. The ER took Emery back immediately. Frank stayed. He sat in the waiting room while they triaged me, while they x-rayed my elbow, while pediatrics came down and put Emery under warming lights and started running labs. He stayed for 4 hours. I'd never seen this man before in my life. Around 2 in the morning, a charge nurse I knew from the cardiac floor, a woman named Denise who has 3 grown kids and 0 patience for nonsense, came and sat next to me. She held my good hand. "Honey," she said, "we need to make a report. You know we do." I knew. I'm a mandated reporter myself. I would have made the report on somebody else without a second thought. "It's my mother," I said. "I know, honey, I know." She squeezed my hand. "It's still the right thing." A police officer came. A young black woman with her hair pulled back tight, who introduced herself as Officer Ramos and who pulled up a chair instead of standing over me, which I noticed and was grateful for. I told her everything. I told her about the deck. I told her about the deck. I told her about Carhartt filming. When I said that, Officer Ramos looked up from her notes and said, very quietly, "She filmed it? On her phone." She was filming through the kitchen window. Officer Ramos wrote that down and underlined it twice. Around 4 a.m., Frank, this stranger, this man I had known for 6 hours, said, "Reese, I gotta ask you something and I want you to think before you answer. Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" And I almost lied. I almost said yes. Because that's what you do. You protect strangers from the inconvenience of your real life. But I was so tired, I just shook my head. He nodded slow. "Okay, so here's the deal. My wife passed 3 years ago. My daughter's grown, she lives in Raleigh. I got a finished apartment over my garage, used to be my mother-in-law's before she moved into memory care. It's got a kitchen, it's got a bathroom, it's got heat. It's been sitting empty for 14 months. You and Emery are welcome to it for as long as you need. No rent. I'm not asking you for anything. I just can't go home tonight knowing you don't have anywhere to take her." I started crying again. I think I said no like 4 times. He just kept nodding and waiting. "Frank," I said, "I don't know you." "I know," he said. "I know, but my wife, Margaret, if she was alive and I drove past you on that road and didn't stop, she would have come back from the grave and killed me herself. So I'm not really doing this." "She is." Denise, who had been pretending not to listen, leaned over and said, "Reese, I know Frank. He coaches my nephew's youth league. He's good people. Call me in the morning if it's weird. I'll come get you myself." So that's how, at 5 in the morning on January 9th, with my daughter in a hospital-issued onesie and a foil blanket, I rode home with the man I had met 7 hours earlier, to an apartment above his garage in a quiet neighborhood off Lawndale Drive. The apartment had a crib in it. Frank's daughter had used it for his granddaughter when she visited. There were clean sheets on the bed. There was a working thermostat. There was a deadbolt on the door, and Frank handed me the only key and said, "I don't have a copy. That one's yours." I slept with Emery in my arms on top of the covers with all my clothes on. I didn't even take my shoes off. The next morning I woke up at noon to a soft knock and Frank's voice saying he'd left a bag outside the door. "No rush, take your time." Inside the bag was a gallon of whole milk, a box of those little plastic containers of baby food, a sleeve of Pampers in size 4, a fresh pack of pacifiers still in the plastic, and a handwritten note that just said, "I'll be in the workshop in the back if you need anything. Frank." I sat on the floor of that apartment, and I cried for an hour. 2 days later, a woman named Glenda showed up. She was in her 60s, black, sharp as a tack, with reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She introduced herself as Frank's neighbor and Margaret's old book club friend. She brought a casserole. She brought clothes for Emery in 3 different sizes because, in her words, I didn't know if she was a chunk or a string bean. She sat on my couch, and she did not ask me a single question about what happened. She just told me where the closest grocery store was, where the cheapest pediatrician was that took Medicaid, which laundromat had the best dryers, and that her grandson Marcus was a paralegal, and if I ever wanted to talk to somebody about my options for free, she'd hand me his number. I took the number. I didn't call it yet. For about 10 days, I let myself breathe. I went back to work 3 days after the storm. My manager, a woman named Brenda, who I had worked under for 2 years, sat me down in her office and said, "Whatever you need, schedule, days, swaps. Tell me what you need." I didn't even ask. She just offered. I learned more about who my real people were in that 1 week than I had learned in the previous 25 years. Then, on a Friday afternoon, while I was folding laundry and watching Emery push a wooden block around the living room rug, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize, a 336 area code. It was a process server. He was at the front gate. Could I come down? My stomach went into my throat. I left Emery with Frank, who was on his porch drinking coffee, and I walked to the gate. The man handed me a manila envelope. He didn't smile. He said, "You've been served," and walked back to his Camry. I sat down on Frank's front steps and opened it. My mother had filed for emergency grandparent custody of Emery. The petition said I was unstable. It said I was living with a man I'd known for less than 2 weeks. It said I had untreated postpartum depression, which I had never been diagnosed with by anyone. It said I had a history of running away when challenged, which I assume was about the time I left for college. It said Emery was at risk in my care. I read it 3 times. My hands shook so hard the second time that I had to set the papers down on the step. Frank found me there 20 minutes later. He sat down next to me without saying anything. After a long minute he said, "Tell me what it is." I told him. He listened. When I was done, he stood up, brushed off his jeans and said, "Go get your daughter. We're going to call Marcus." Marcus, Glenda's grandson, met us at a coffee shop the next afternoon. He was 28. Soft-spoken, with these wire-rimmed glasses, and he read every page of my mother's petition twice before he looked up. "Okay," he said. "First, this is not as scary as it looks. Second, your mother has a lawyer who knows how to write a scary-looking petition. Third, we have something they don't think we have." "What? You said your sister filmed it." I stared at him. "Reese, listen to me. If your sister filmed it, that video exists somewhere. On her phone, on her cloud backup, on Snapchat, somewhere. And if she filmed her grandmother locking a 14-month-old out on an iced deck and laughed while she did it, that is the entire case. That's it. That's the whole thing. How do we get it?" He smiled, just a little. "We don't have to get it." He smiled, just a little. "We just have to ask for it, on the record with a judge watching. People who do something stupid and film it always delete it, and deleted is not the same as gone. We have a forensics guy. He's expensive, but I have a feeling I can convince him to do this one on a sliding scale." I told him I had $1,800 in my checking account and I would give him every dollar of it. He told me to keep my money. Glenda had already called him. He was doing this one for his grandmother. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of my life. My mother's lawyer was a woman named Patricia Hennings, and she was good. She filed motion after motion. She tried to get temporary custody granted to my mother pending the full hearing. That motion got denied, but barely. My mother showed up to the preliminary hearing in pearls and a cream-colored cardigan, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief like she was auditioning for a Hallmark movie. My sister sat in the second row in a navy dress, hands folded in her lap, looking like the loyal daughter from a Pinterest board. The first time I saw them in that courthouse, my whole body started shaking. Frank, who had insisted on driving me and who was sitting right behind me, put his big calloused hand on my shoulder, just for a second, just enough for me to feel it. I stopped shaking. I want to tell you about one moment, because this one moment lives in my head and I think it always will. We were in the hallway during a break. I had just come out of the ladies' room and I turned the corner and there was my mother, standing by the water fountain, alone. She saw me. I saw her. There was nobody else in the hall. She walked toward me. Slowly. She stopped about 3 feet away. "Reese," she said in that voice she used to use when I was little and I'd done something to embarrass her at church. "Sweetheart, this doesn't have to be like this. Drop it, move home, we'll forget the whole thing. I'll watch Emery on your long days. We can be a family again." And the thing is, for 1 second, one terrible second, I felt the old pull. The little girl pull. The part of me that has wanted my mother to love me my entire life and has never gotten an answer. But then I thought about the deck. I thought about cherry print onesies. I thought about little blue lips. "You filed for custody of my child," I said. My voice was quiet. "You sat in a kitchen drinking wine while she was outside in 28 degrees. You lied in a sworn document. There is no version of this where you watch her again. Not for 1 hour. Not ever." Her face changed. I had never in my entire life seen my mother look at me the way she looked at me right then, and I realized, standing there in that hallway, what I was actually seeing. I was seeing what she looked like when she couldn't pretend anymore, when the audience was gone, when it was just her and me, and there was nothing behind her eyes, you guys. There was just nothing. She leaned in. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But she won't." I walked past her into the courtroom. The full hearing was on a Thursday in March. The forensics guy, whose name was Devin, took the stand and explained in plain English how he had been able to pull a deleted video file from a cloud backup on my sister's Google account, which her own lawyer had inadvertently authorized access to in a discovery agreement they hadn't read carefully enough. Marcus had warned me this might not work. It worked. The video was 41 seconds long. It started with my sister's voice off camera saying, "Oh my God, Mom, she's like actually losing it." It showed Emery on the deck. It showed her crying. It showed my mother walk into frame, look down at her and say, "To my sister, let her scream. She needs to learn. Pour me another glass." The judge, an older man named Judge Caldwell, watched that video twice. The second time, the courtroom was completely silent. When it was over, he took off his glasses, set them on the bench, and rubbed his eyes for what felt like a full minute. Then he looked at my mother, just looked at her, and he said, in a voice you could have heard in the parking lot, "Ma'am, the petition is denied. I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review of charges of misdemeanor child neglect and reckless endangerment. I am granting Ms. Pirao Whitaker, that's me, a 1-year protective order against you and against the co-witness, your daughter Cara, on behalf of the minor child Emery Whitaker. You will not contact this child. You will not approach this child. You will not be within 500 feet of this child. Is that clear?" She didn't answer. "Ma'am, is that clear?" "Yes," she said. Very small. I didn't cry in the courtroom. I cried in the parking lot, in Frank's truck, with the engine running and the heat on, while he sat next to me and didn't say a word and just let me do it. He had a box of Kleenex in his console. He always had a box of Kleenex in his console. I think about that a lot. The DA picked up the case. My mother pled out to a misdemeanor and got a year of probation and mandatory parenting classes, which I find darkly funny in a way I don't say out loud. Cara was charged as a co-witness and got community service. The video, somehow, did not stay private. I have my theories about how it got out, but I have never asked Marcus directly. My mother lost her position on the church council. The HOA didn't renew her board seat. My sister deleted her Instagram, which had been her whole personality. I am not going to pretend any of that healed me. It didn't. There is a version of me that still flinches when an older woman uses a certain tone. There is a version of me that startled for about 6 months every time the doorbell rang. Healing is not a straight line. But Emery turned 2 in November. She had a party at the little park near Frank's house. Glenda made the cake. Marcus came with his fiancée. My friend Talia drove up from Charlotte. My brother Trey, my younger brother who'd been at school in Tennessee through all of this and who I had been almost afraid to tell because he had always been so quiet around our mother, came home for the weekend. He sat on the curb with me after everyone left and he said, "Reese, I should have called you. I should have called you years ago. I was scared of her too." I told him it was okay. It is, and it isn't, but I told him it was okay. It is and it isn't, but I told him it was okay. I still live in the apartment over Frank's garage. I pay him $300 a month now, which he tried to refuse for 9 months until I finally told him he was insulting me, and then he laughed and said, "Okay, I'm finishing my BSN online. I work 3 12s a week instead of 4. Emery goes to a home daycare run by a woman named Pilar who Glenda found for me, and who texts me a photo every day at lunch of Emery doing something ridiculous. A couple weeks ago, Emery and I were sitting on the steps of Frank's front porch, waiting for Glenda to come over with collards, and Emery pointed at Frank, who was across the lawn fixing something on his lawnmower, and she said very clearly, "Pop." I hadn't taught her that. Nobody had taught her that. Frank looked up. He didn't say anything, he just kind of nodded at her, slow, like he was acknowledging an agreement. Then he went back to the lawnmower. I sat on those steps and I thought about that deck, about cherry print onesies, about how I used to think family was the people whose blood you shared and whose approval you spent your whole life trying to earn. And I thought about Frank, and Glenda, and Marcus, and Denise, and Brenda, and Officer Ramos, and Pilar, and Talia, and Trey, who are not all related to me but who, when the door closed in my face, every single one of them opened a different one. My mother locked my daughter out in the cold to teach me a lesson. She did teach me a lesson, just not the one she thought. Family isn't who shares your last name. Family is who's standing on the road when you fall on the ice. If you made it all the way to the end of this, thank you, truly. Tell me in the comments where you were listening from. Tell me if somebody opened a door for you when you needed it most. I read every single one of them, and tonight, I need to hear from you. I've thought a lot about that night on the deck. Not the cold, not the running, not the truck headlights sliding toward me on the ice. The 30 seconds I stood there with Emery pressed against my chest, listening to my own mother lock the door behind me. I think about those 30 seconds because that's where I made a choice, and I didn't know I was making it. Here's what I've come to understand. People show you who they are in small ways for years before they show you in big ones. My mother had been pouring me a thimble of poison since I was a little girl, and I had been drinking it and saying thank you. The cherry print onesie on the icy deck wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the bill coming due on 25 years of being told that her cruelty was my fault for being too sensitive. Cause and effect. She did what she did because nobody had ever made her stop. And I almost didn't make her stop that night either. I almost went back inside. I almost said sorry. What I want to tell you, and what I wish somebody had told me at 20, is this. Walking away from people who hurt you is not the same as failing. It is the single most grown-up thing you will ever do. And it will cost you. It cost me a mother, a sister, a house, the version of myself that was always trying to earn a love that was never going to come. But Kara filmed 41 seconds of footage that ended up saving my daughter, and I think about that sometimes. The same cruelty that almost killed Emery is what proved my case in court. The universe is not fair, but it is sometimes very, very strange. The other thing I want to say is about Frank, about Glenda, about Marcus, who took my case for free, about Denise holding my hand in the ER. None of those people owed me anything. They didn't share my last name. They didn't go to my baby shower. They just saw a woman in trouble and they decided individually, quietly, without making a show of it, to do the right thing. That is what good people look like. They look like a stranger in a Carhartt jacket. They look like a casserole on your doorstep. They look like a neighbor's grandson who picks up the phone. I am not a brave person. I want you to know that. I am a tired ADN nurse from North Carolina who got pushed past the last place she could be pushed and finally turned around. If I can do this, you can do this. The deck you're standing on does not have to be the rest of your life. Build your character on the days nothing is happening, because the days when everything is happening, you won't have time to build anything. Be the kind of person who would stop on an icy road. Be the kind of person who tells the truth in a courthouse hallway when the audience is gone. Your daughter, your son, your future self is watching.